tax relief. Join satisfied clients like Victoria. She owed the IRS $32,000. They accepted $300. She saved $31,700. Leroy owed $21,000. The IRS accepted $500, and he saved $20,500. Get fast IRS tax relief and save too. Call 800-294-8182. Has the IRS threatened to shut down your business, freeze your bank accounts, take your home, your cars, or garnish your wages? You may qualify for special programs to stop this process. Get fast IRS tax relief. The industry experts with negotiating with the IRS with an A rating with the Better Business Bureau. Call today and the IRS will be contacted the same day, putting a stop to bank levies and wage garnishments. Call the Fast IRS Tax Relief Hotline at 800-294-8182. 800-294-8182. That's 800-294-8182.
Police in Braintree, Massachusetts say the suspect accused of shooting a police officer in the face at a motel had been on authorities' radar for a while.
He's an individual who is known to the Boston police. He has a number of weapon charges.
North Fork District Attorney Michael Morrissey says Officer Donald Delane went to the Motel 6 to serve a warrant on Tizaya Robinson. Those ripped, torn, shredded, dirty looks have taken off, and now they're going to new extremes.
It's the latest fashion trend, falling into the so hip it hurts category. Beat up, worn sneakers that look more like Fido used them as a chew toy. Neiman Marcus is selling the future destroyed high-top sneaker for a cool $1,425 a pair. The high-top shoes sport holes and are falling apart, much like the ones you threw out years ago. The battered sneaks come on the heels of Nordstrom's thrifty idea, selling a pair of jeans with fake mud on them for $425. So hold on to those socks with holes in them or any other worn-out garb. You may just start a trend. Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
The Interior Department's identified 27 national monuments, mostly in the West, which may face the rolling back or elimination of protections that were put in place over the past 2 decades by presidents from both parties. President Trump says protections that were imposed by his 3 immediate predecessors have amounted to what he calls a massive federal land grab and should never have happened. This is ABC News.
It's an era of politics like we've never seen before. I'm ABC News Chief White House Correspondent Jonathan Karl. Join me on my podcast, Powerhouse Politics. We go beyond the headlines of the day with in-depth interviews, talking to the people shaping our political landscape. And of course, we leave room for the ABC reporters on the front lines. It's Powerhouse Politics with me, Jonathan Karl. Check it out on iTunes or abcnewspodcast.com.
Daria Albinger, ABC News.
From the KMET Weather Center for Beaumont and the Pass area this morning, we can expect a mostly cloudy day with a chance for showers. We'll have a wind advisory in effect from 2 o'clock this afternoon through 2 o'clock tonight. Our high 61, winds will gust to 30 miles an hour. We'll have showers tonight with a thunderstorm possible. Today mostly cloudy with a low of 44 as winds gust to 30 miles an hour. Fort Redlands, there's a chance for showers today. Today partly sunny with a high of 66 with winds to 25 miles an hour. For Palm Springs, it'll be sunny and windy with a high of 83. I'm Rod Tanner for Smart Talk 1490 KMET.
The Banning Beaumont Cherry Valley Tea Party meets every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. for informal breakfast and discussion. And they meet each month on the second Thursday at 5 p.m., all at the Farms House Restaurant in Banning. Listen to interesting speakers, learn about our Constitution with our free classes, enjoy friendly discussions, and informal dining. Come join us. For more information, call Glenn Stoll, 951-316-3843.
The following is a paid program. Views and claims expressed are those of the program producer and are not endorsed by this station. Opinions expressed are not necessarily those of radio station KMET, its management, employees, or affiliates.
Welcome back. It is time for Constitution Radio's second hour, commercial free. It's listener paid for. Welcome back to the program. I am Douglas V. Gibbs, douglasvgibbs.com, politicalpistachio.com. I am joined in the studio by Dennis Jackson. He is the executive producer of Enemies Within Movie, enemieswithinmovie.com. And on the phone with Alex Ferguson, the Commie Hunter. And Alex, you can read, all kinds of stuff that he's put out there at conservativecannonade.org, conservativecannonade.org. You can learn more about this program not only at douglasvgibbs.com and hit the radio link, but also you can go to KMET 1490 AM and search for the show. Find the Saturday menu. Hit Constitution Radio, and you can not only learn more about the program, but you can also access the podcast, the TV link. If you listen live, you can actually watch me do the show. I wind up putting the videos on YouTube later, by the way. And you can also get yourself a phone app. That's right. Can't get it on the radio? Not near your computer? Have the KMET phone app. Make your smartphone smarter. Have the phone app so you can listen to Constitution Radio every Saturday at 1 o'clock from 1 to 3. All right, according to Fox News, the United Nations has warned the Trump administration that repealing Obamacare without providing an adequate replacement would be a violation of multiple international laws. Now, first of all, I could care less about international law. Founding fathers intended us to be exceptional, an exception to the norm, nothing like the rest of the world. International law means nothing to me. Let's do it the American way, not the world's way, number one. And we'll get back to that. The other thing is, it's not the government's job to guarantee our rights. Not that healthcare is a right. Healthcare is not a right. And the greatest threat to our rights is government. So why would we want the greatest threat to our rights to be the one to guarantee our rights? And if they guarantee our rights, couldn't they define what our rights are and whether or not we should get them? We're opening up a Pandora's box of all kinds of bad things if we say health care is a right and government's job is to guarantee our right. Therefore, they have to make sure we have health care. You're opening the door to totalitarianism when you do that. Now, I'm not sure if the Democrats are taking the warning from the UN seriously, but I hope the Trump administration and the GOP is not. I hope they're ignoring it. My first reaction is screw the UN. We should leave the organization anyway. And let's see how long the international tool for communism and Islam lasts without our money being pumped into it. As for whether or not we should abide by international law or internationalism or whatnot, the Founding Fathers intended the United States to be exceptional, an exception to the norm. The framers of the U.S. Constitution were determined to refuse to follow the political systems plaguing Europe and most of history. And instead, they came to the conclusion that we should have a republic, a mixed constitution, unlike anything out there, unlike Europe, unlike anything in history. During the writing of that constitution, the delegates representing the states created a federal government limited to only authorities that protect, preserve, and promote the Union. The only thing in history that even comes close to the framework of our system is Israel, back in the book of Deuteronomy. Instead of states, they had tribes. According to James Madison in Federalist number 45, the federal government's powers are few and defined, while the states are numerous and indefinite and are retained for the purpose of extending to all objects which, in the ordinary course of affairs, concern the lives, liberties, and properties of the people and the internal order, improvement, and prosperity of the state. Doesn't that sound like healthcare belongs there? Where does it fit into the federal government's external issues when it's up to the states to take care of what concerns the ordinary course of affairs, the lives, liberties, properties of the people, internal order, improvement, and prosperity of the state? Additionally, the men of that time period, such as George Washington, warned against foreign entanglements. He suggested in his 1796 farewell address that foreign entanglements are sometimes an unnatural connection, that we should not allow the opening of the door of foreign influence and corruption. He said the insidious wiles of foreign influence, the jealousy of a free people, ought to be constantly awake. Since history and experience, this is George Washington, since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of Republican government. And it was him, and he felt it was his job, among others, to warn against the mischiefs. This is quote again, warn against the mischiefs of foreign intrigue, to guard against the impostures of pretended patriotism. Almost sounds like the left, doesn't it, Dennis?
Yeah.
So we've got the UN saying, hey, you can't get rid of your Obamacare. That's against international law. And my response is, screw international law. George Washington says so. Alex, what do you think?
I think that America is a sovereign nation, and that word is
adamantine solid. For us to subject ourselves to every banana republic with their Marxists and their jihadists, just as you say, it's nuts. We don't have any reason.
The rest of the world has strong central governments, national systems where power emanates from the top down. Why do we want to even listen to them, right?
They're our enemy. Every time they pass a resolution in the UN, it's against Israel, it's against America. And you look at the countries like Iran and Syria and whatever, they're putting them in charge of human rights. Are they out of their minds?
Well, unlike the rest of the world, in America, the states and the people use, they are the source of the power. The central government was created to serve the states and the people, not rule over them. The federal government's service is primarily centered around external issues, while the responsibilities of the people and the state governments are regarding the internal issues. But see, in the rest of the world, you have these strong central governments, not federal, but national governments that control everything. They are the source of power.
I'm looking at it like this Trump election is a turning point.
Sure.
And that step by step from here on in, we can start eliminating things that cost us a lot of money and a lot of grief and aren't fair. And what are we doing them for in the first place?
Dennis. Who cares what the United Nations thinks, right? I mean, they don't understand Americanism. They don't understand state sovereignty. The federal government's not authorized to be involved in health care, health insurance, health procedures, including abortion, by the way. States never gave the federal government those powers. They don't understand that concept. They don't understand that dynamic. So what do we care what the rest of the world thinks, right?
The United Nations
I agree wholeheartedly with that.
Was founded by Alger Hiss. Alger Hiss is a guaranteed, proven spy.
Right.
Nearly all the spies that were in the government under FDR went over to the UN. After World War II, they pulled up roots and went to the UN. It is a communist conspiracy, and that's not right-wing paranoia. That's just a simple fact.
Now, in all fairness, let the other side have their say here. We have the sob stories, like the one that late-night host Jimmy Kimmel delivered, designed to tug at your heartstrings and call for universal socialized health care because, his baby needed heart surgery, and no baby should not have heart surgery if it's necessary because a bunch of politicians are arguing it should just be available for everybody. And we are expected to believe that if Obamacare is repealed and a baby does not get heart surgery, it's your fault, Republicans, because there's no federal health care system, because if the federal government doesn't do it, it won't happen. Everybody's doomed to a health care system reminiscent of the Middle Ages during the era of the bubonic plague if we get rid of Obamacare. And so, have feelings here now. Have feelings. Do the right thing because of your feelings. That's what the other side is saying. And doesn't that tug on your heartstrings there, Alex?
Well, what it does is it reminds me that Medicare is billions of dollars ripped off every year. The extent to which corruption invades and infects and takes over these federal organizations is what happened under Hillary. The State Department lost $6 billion. Where did the money go? Nobody knows. But by golly, we got what we wanted.
Well, since Dennis is over here fighting with his device, I think it's a great time to now call on him because he's going to not have what he has and he'll have to pull it out of his brain. All right, Dennis, so you've heard us talking about this. You've heard my feelings about internationalism, the sob story given by Jimmy Kimmel, the leftist idea of universal socialized health care. What are your comments?
Well, I'm trying to pull up my political website because I've got comments in there that I made close to 10 years ago about the UN and the Constitution and international law and the courts, and that, international law should have no bearing at all upon what we do in this country. period. So I knew you were going to ask my opinion. I was going to read you what I wrote way back then, but it's very slow loading here.
Are you saying I'm faster than modern technology?
Well, I tell you, I just couldn't pull this thing up. But, you know, and I'm a parent, okay? I've lost 2 children, all right? There's 2 buried out there, you know, in La Brea right now, or at the cemetery. Now, they were both stillborns. You know, one, the first on delivery, and the other one full term and died in utero, and 2-3 days later, you know, was born. And that's not the natural order of things. Now, unlike Kimmel, the baby wasn't alive, born, and able to be operated on. You know, and yes, it is a tender heartstring, and it is a good story as far as a cause. But I would just invite Mr. Kimmel, you know, rather than hit whole society, because the U.S., you could say the same thing. How many people are dying without adequate health care throughout the world?
Right.
You know, so the U.S. ought to
right.
bankrupt every dime we have to help the world. And when you do that, you prop up the governments that are over there. You know, our free trade with China is the only thing that keeps China afloat. If China did not have access to the Western capitalist countries to export their goods, they'd still be going around in rickshaws and doing rice. But
Western civilization, basically the English-speaking colonies in Britain, be honest with you, is where all this comes from. Most inventions in history have come from England and the United States. But, I mean, our system is what has created what's out there. You know, in the Muslim countries, did they build those cars they're driving? Those TVs that they're watching?
And it was to a great degree America that went in there with the oil companies and put all this stuff in. And of course,
we also had past tense, the greatest healthcare system in the world. We abandoned it by letting government get in the way. You and I were listening to a gentleman by the name of Sean Flynn out there at the Redlands Tea Party, and he talked about a country that hung on to the original American system, keeping government largely out of the healthcare system, encouraging privatization and competition between the various parts of the medical industry. And while there is a minor safety net in Singapore, and for some cases by government, which is, by the way, here in the U.S. is something the states can legally do, the result is that Singapore, that's the country, Singapore has the most effective and successful healthcare system in the world, using our system that we have abandoned.
Yeah. Well, and going back to the comment with Jimmy Kimmel, I would invite Mr. Kimmel to take a look at his earnings and his savings account and his investments and his excess things that he has, whether it be toys beyond that, and just liquidate all that and give it to, I don't care, Children's Hospital in L.A. or some fund for, you know, special emergencies for children only. And I would invite all the liberals to do the same thing.
Right.
You know, just fine. You put all your money in, but, you know, when you federalize this, I've got insurance when I was working with an employer. I don't have company-provided insurance anymore. But when I did, and I was a licensed life and health insurance agent in California, so I understand this fairly well.
Yeah, I did that.
But, you know, the basic premiums cover pregnancy, which, you know, I'm not ever going to get pregnant. I'm a single man here. Okay. You also have to pay for treatment and alcoholism. I've never had a drink in my life, you know, so the insurance that I'm forced to get the benefits bundled in, you know, I don't want them, you know, but yet I pay for them. So I'm subsidizing the people that do need alcohol treatment or depression.
Never had a drink
treatment.
in your life. The liberals will tell you you're lying. Everybody's had a drink in their life.
Well, you know what I'm talking about.
I know you're honestly never had a drink in your life. My wife actually never had a drink in her life until she met me, and she's been drinking ever since. No, I'm kidding.
Well, the point is that the government mandates, the federal mandates to health insurance drives up the cost.
Right.
And people who don't want those mandates, you know, and say, no, I don't need that coverage. I don't want to pay for that. It doesn't matter. They have to pay for it.
Right. Because
so
the government says so.
Even before Obamacare, you know, 10 years ago,
right,
you were forced to buy stuff you didn't need, so you basically could subsidize others for it.
Right.
You know. So if you really got into a free market, a lot of people would be able to afford the type of insurance that they do want.
Well, you go back
it's
to
just not available
Singapore. To get an open heart surgery here in the United States, it's nearly a couple $100,000. It's over $100,000. It's nearly a couple $100,000. In Singapore, it's like what, $18,000?
I don't know. I remember Sean threw out some great numbers.
The liberal left will say, yeah, but the doctors make less. They don't get paid as well. Well, yes and no. Even though they earn a little bit less than doctors here, and by the way, they're all trained by American schools. The tax rate in Singapore is so low, they actually get to keep so much more. They make more. Singapore, holding on to the Saxon American English-speaking political system, has become the jewel of Southeast Asia. In Africa, the two countries to hang on to the Saxon English-speaking political system of free enterprise and limited government, Botswana and South Africa, are the two biggest economies in Africa, and they don't have the starvation that the Marxist, socialist, and Muslim countries of Africa have. There is a reason why the United States and Canada and Australia and South Africa and India have done well while the other colonies by other countries haven't. It's because of the political system. It has nothing to do with race, has nothing to do with location in the world, and everything to do with political system. And we are abandoning ours. Or at least they're trying to abandon it.
Well, they're trying to destroy it because we stand in the way of their ability to spread their authoritarian regime.
Well, and this brings Alex in the conversation. The enemies of what our system is, the exact opposite is Marxism, socialism, communism, whatever you want to call it. And we've got a liberal left Democrat Party treating it like it's this new idea. It's this great new thing. It has failed every single time it has been tried in the world and in history.
And those people that support those policies, socialism, Marxism, communism, whether it be mainstream media, whether it be, the Socialist Democrats or the leaders of the DNC, are the very people that are jumping on the Republicans, primarily Trump and his election group, about their ties to communism. It is so hypocritical and ironic that it drives me nuts. They paint the Republicans as if we're in collusion with communism when they're basically the hand puppets of
communism. They call
communism.
Trump the fascist when everything they're doing, including on the college campuses, silencing the opposition, is fascist, communist, statist, and so on and so forth. All right, Commie Hunter, you've been nice and quiet this whole time we've been talking, and I know you've been stewing. There's all kinds of things I know you want to say. So unleash.
Well, I'm saying I would emphasize more that the difference is it's not just the political, but it's the economic.
Well, the economic, though, is directly affected by the political.
Well, okay, but you can have capitalism without freedom. It's possible. China is not free. Russia is not free.
Well, they inserted a little bit of capitalism in their system, became the fastest growing economy, but the government control is also causing it to collapse. It's a temporary bubble because of the communism. So even though they got that temporary rise, the political system doomed it.
Well, I call it commutalism, not capitalism. Okay, because you have human capital.
Right.
Okay, you have physical capital, equipment capital,
right,
and you've got financial capital. They control all three. They can control how much you're paying. It's not a free market, is what they make. They control the money. They control the pricing. So they
control FBI Director Comey. They control Hillary Clinton.
So they are not competing in a free capitalistic society. They have suppressed costs. Now, if they were to allow their people to make a living wage, if China were to raise their standard of living, and all these other smaller, whether it be Vietnam or other countries that are trying to compete, if there was a living wage there would not be as much foreign trade because it would balance out a lot more, and they'd have more wealth in their country and more consumers in their country, they wouldn't have to rely on export to the Western civilizations and the wealth there, because they'd be generating more themselves. But it's an unfair balance. We get beat up to keep with our tax rates and the benefits that the government mandates our businesses, to give. That's not the case in China.
Well, it's funny that you guys brought up too that the Soviet Union was always the enemy. Suddenly, when it suits their purposes, the Democrats have finally figured out after 50 to 100 years that Russia might be the enemy, and then they use it to their advantage, assuming and claiming. And really, it's a bold-faced lie, but a lot of them now believe their own BS, that Russia interfered with the election. And FBI Director Comey, in his recent testimonies, he admitted to the deception, admitted that there was wrongdoing by people like Hillary Clinton and himself even, but it's okay. It's no big deal.
Can I make my point?
Yeah, go ahead.
Some time ago, I was trying to say that Russia is not a communist country anymore. That's why the liberals hate it. China is not a truly communist country. They're fascist now.
So Russia betrayed the fight, huh?
What happened was that these countries realized that they were starving. After the Vietnam War, the Vietnamese put in a super strong socialist system, and they were starving. Look at North Korea, starving. Russia was beaten in the Cold War economically. They couldn't afford the weapon systems that we were putting out. I'm saying that those countries went over to a form of state capitalism. It's capitalism that creates prosperity, and they now have prosperous systems. Now they're not as good as they would be if they had democracy, but it's possible to have state capitalism function. And so you've got Vietnam getting rich. You've got China.
The socialists and the communist leaders, they've got to realize, and I think Marx realized this, that really socialism is parasitic. It can't exist without capitalism somewhere to feed off of.
Well, in my book review coming up, I'm going to be talking about how the whole structure of communism is a fraud. But I'll get into that in a while.
Well, I mean, the thing is the blame game when it comes to Russia, and I think you're partially right. I think the Democrats see Russia as having left the good fight because they're no longer a communist country, and therefore they've become the enemy. I think that may be a good point. Hillary Clinton, though, she's sitting there using that as all these false scapegoats for her loss. It's Russia's fault. It's Director Comey's fault. It's WikiLeaks' fault. Assange's fault.
Well,
she can't seem to realize that. Well, first of all, she's a bad candidate. Second of all, Americans have gotten sick and tired of the leftist BS. And third of all, Trump played the game better.
We've got a DVD from 60 Minutes that shows Bill Clinton selling our most advanced military technology to the Chinese right at the time when the Chinese were illegally, through Charlie Tree and Johnny Chung, were funneling money into the Clintons' lap. You talk about hypocrisy. They invented hypocrisy.
All right, you did mention a book review, and it's the bottom of the hour, so let's give you 10 minutes to go over that. What's the name of the book?
Okay, the book is Political Pilgrims, Travels of Western Intellectuals to the Soviet Union, China, and Cuba.
Okay, this is the book you've been talking about the last few weeks, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to keep on talking about it because I'm having revelations out of this thing that are just killing me.
So now I want to stop you there just for a second. So you, who know so much about communism, and you've been on top of this stuff, and you're well versed in this stuff, you are having epiphanies reading this particular book.
Rereading it. I read it a long time ago. It's part of my generalized knowledge, but going over the details, I find with these books, there's a lot more in them than you get on a simple first read.
All right. So first of all, your recommendation is to read this book a couple of times. And what did you say the name of the book was, and who the author was again?
Political Pilgrims, Travels of Western Intellectuals to the Soviet Union, China, and Cuba. It's by Paul Hollander, Hollander.
Okay.
Now, the epiphany that I ran into this week is that they say in the book here that Marxism in power is the exact opposite of Marxism in revolution, and that makes sense. The revolutionary Marxist is a free love advocate. He's in for abstract art. He's in for drugs, whatever. Soon as they take power, they become Calvinistic in their morality. There's none of that stuff's supposed to go on. You become straight-laced. It's a very moralistic, in quotation marks, state. Now, they used to say that the revolution always eats its young. The reason for that is that communism is a complete and total fraud. Not only does it change, bait and switch, it changed for the revolutionary who suddenly finds himself in a extremely moralistic, uptight society. But the nature of what communism is was supposed to be defined by Marx. The things that Marx said have been totally ignored. They've changed it from Marxism to Marxism-Leninism because Lenin just changed all the rules arbitrarily. Really, there is no set Marxist system. What they have is a reach for power. Power is everything. Whatever gives them power is good. Whatever doesn't give them power, whatever takes away their power, threatens them, is bad. It's just that simple. Now, the mystery that I've been wondering about with this Political Pilgrims book is how it is, and I've said this every time, how is it that these nominally highly intelligent people could become spies, and there were 200 of them at least in the FDR administration, between 200 and 300 of them, genuine working spies with control agents and the whole, code names, all that. How could so many people who were raised in the almost perfect society, where there's freedom and prosperity and human rights and everything you could ask for, they're spying on behalf of the world's worst system? The Stalinist Russian system was the most depraved, brutal, dictatorial, poverty-stricken, starvation-based system in the world. And the answer is these political pilgrims did it to us. They went over there, and I'll be reading excerpts here. They went over there, and they believed what they believed. They ignored what they didn't want to believe, and they came back to the United States as a mass, as an intellectual elite group, and they told.
Now, at Amazon.com, where to buy this book, and by the way, there's no copies for less than $18, and that's used. I mean, this is a book that goes for some money. Here's the way it asks some questions, I think, that really explains where this book goes. Why did so many distinguished Western intellectuals, from G.B. Shaw to J.P. Sartre, and closer to home from Edmund Wilson to Susan Sontag, which I told you she was one of my writing teachers actually, admire various communist systems, often in their repressive historical phases. How could Stalin's Soviet Union, Mao's China, and Castro's Cuba appear at one time as both successful modernizing societies and the fulfillments of the boldest dreams of social justice? Why, at the same time, had these intellectuals so mercilessly judged and rejected their own Western liberal cultures? What impulses and beliefs prompted them to seek the realization of their ideals in distant, poorly known lands? How do their journeys fit into the long-standing Western traditions of looking for new meaning in the non-Western world? And that, I think, really ties into Bo nicely what this book is about. I mean, and these are questions that, because we have this misguided thought that we are in the post-communist era. We are not in the post-communist era. We are still in the communist era. Now the communist era has learned how to not be in your face as a communist country, but to rot from beneath your bottom and to rot your system through infiltration. But and political utopianism, this goes back, way back. I mean, the Founding Fathers talked about this stuff. But this book, it sounds like, really nails it, what's wrong with communism, yet these distinguished Western intellectuals fell more in love with it. I don't get it.
They wanted to be fooled, and that's one of the quotes from the book. They wanted to be fooled. And Stalin was the most evil man that ever lived, probably. And he was, part of his evil was that he's a shape changer. He's a chimera. He becomes whatever you want him to become. He'll act that way. He'll convince you. He'll build his Potemkin villages and his prisons that aren't really prisons. They're movie sets with actors. He'll do whatever he has to do, and the American intellectuals were like sheep going to slaughter.
But doesn't that kind of go back to that Mark Twain quote? Have you ever heard this one by Mark Twain? Even though there's, well, at least he's attributed this quote to, I don't know if it's ever been proven. It's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled.
Well, the book here says that the Pilgrims are unquestionably one of the wonders of the age. And I shall treasure this is Malcolm Muggeridge. There were 3 people that I've identified that actually changed their minds because of what they saw. They went by the evidence that was in front of their nose. He says, the spectacle of them traveling with radiant optimism through a famished countryside, wandering in happy bands about squalid, overcrowded towns, listening with unshakable faith to the fatuous patter of carefully trained and indoctrinated guides repeating like school children a multiplication table, the bogus statistics and mindless slogans endlessly intoned to them. The almost unbelievable credulity of these mostly university-educated tourists astonished even the Soviet officials used to handling foreign visitors. Well, what happened was that the people who were living in America in the Depression, all the information they got was from these tourists who had been brainwashed.
Right.
Among the factors which inhibit a more impartial expression of moral impulses among Western intellectuals is the largely unverifiable and unexamined article of faith of our times, that left-wing authoritarian regimes are singularly adept at improving the material conditions of life for the masses. While sympathizers may concede that such improvements are attained at the expense of certain civil liberties, there is willingness, belief that poor people have no interest in personal freedom. According to the study published by the American Friends Service Committee, the Quakers, those in misery cry bread, and as long as they do not
remember, Marx had attributed everything to economic conditions.
Yeah.
Everything,
as long as
even religion.
They do not have bread. They will not respond to slogans of liberty. As for political reasons indicating the alternatives do not reduce to bread or liberty, but that in such political systems both tend to be in short supply. They convinced these people that there was prosperity in Russia while they were deliberately starving 6 million people just to get rid of them, to clear the land and change the system of farming. And what happens is that everything that Marx predicated his system on turned out to be false, one of which was that you're not supposed to try to change a country to a communist country until it has achieved prosperity and abundance. When Lenin took over Russia, Russia was barely a third world country. It was poverty-stricken, ignorant, everything that Marx would have said was a precondition not yet fulfilled. The new and well-defined system of what happened was that they said, okay, we're gonna have everybody make the same amount of money, everybody get the same everything, and very quickly they discovered that doesn't work. So,
now here's the thing. When we're talking about this book, the intellectuals of the time were buying into it. Now it's the entertainment industry, it's the professors, it's those people. It's the Stephen Colberts who's willing to have an anti-Trump rant that's so disgusting that even a few leftists were offended by it. And and I don't know if you heard about Stephen Colbert on in his rant against Trump that included a sexual innuendo. But and they don't. It's weird because we watched the Soviet Union collapse. We watched the Cubans and the Soviets and the Eastern Europeans starve. We watched in Africa as any country that takes on a socialist system collapses and winds up worse than a third world country, while the two countries that follow a system more like ours prosper in that continent. We've watched it happen, and yet they still rant against the American system and want to embrace this failed ideology.
They believe in fairy tales. They believe in fantasy.
They want to be
fooled. As I said at the beginning of this book, Lenin had a library of fairy tales. John Reed was into writing fairy tales. These are true believers, and logic doesn't move them.
Well, it looks good on paper, so it's bound to work, right?
Well, for instance, the stratification. They started having to pay people more for creating more, for reaching higher levels of education and training, just like any other society. And yet they turned around and they give these poor suckers, these American tourists, all kinds of justifications and rationalizations that it's utterly reasonable, being based on the principle of two each according to his achievement. Well, that's not what what Marx said, and it goes against everything in the system. What you end up with is the usual situation that's happened throughout history, where a small group of people have everything, and the rest starve and suffer.
Well, yeah, they say they want to, get rid of the classes, but what they do is they create two classes, the haves and the have-nots. Ultimately, that's what happens.
But the haves, who are called the nomenclatura, they've even got a name for it, the higher-ranking Communist Party members,
right.
They're a tiny number.
Right.
And so they're not very visible. They hide their Dakas and their Packard automobiles and such, so that people believe or are able to believe that it's a unstratified society. It's simply not so.
Well, human nature is not capable of what they try to create. Human nature, with its lust for power and and all of that. And also, when it comes to personal incentive, we want to be self-reliant. We want to be personally responsible. And we prosper when we follow those values. And when those values are taken away, we then digress, or regress, should I say, to the lowest common denominator. We've got less than 15 minutes left, so let's go ahead and wrap up what you're talking about. Give me the name of the book and the author again.
It's called Political Pilgrims, Travels of Western Intellectuals to the Soviet Union, China, and Cuba. Malcolm Muggeridge said, as it happened, no other foreign journalist had been into the famine areas of the USSR except under official auspices and supervision. So my account was by way of being exclusive. This brought me no kudos and many accusations of being a liar. I had to wait for Khrushchev. That was the 1956 20th Congress.
Right, the one that said
Congress.
That he would bury us, yeah.
Well, no, this is the part where he said that Stalin was a murderer and a dictator, and it shook the communist world to its foundations. Many people left. A lot of people didn't. But according to him, my account was considerably understated. So you got people like American Quaker, and Quakers keep coming up in this, by the way. Henry Hodgkin sounded the same theme. He says, as we look at Russia's great experiment in brotherhood, it may seem to us that some dim perception of Jesus' way, all unbeknown and inspiring it. Sherwood Eddy said, the communist philosophy seeks a new order, a classless society of unbroken brotherhood, and the Hebrew prophets would have called a reign of righteousness on earth. Aware of the iniquities of the system under Stalin, which was denounced by Khrushchev and passionately exposed by Solzhenitsyn and other former inmates of Soviet labor camps, it may be hard to believe today that many Western visitors, and especially intellectuals, found Soviet penal institutions and policies among the outstanding accomplishments of the regime. Harder still is to believe that they contrasted Soviet prisons with Western ones most favorably and found the Soviet penal system exemplary in its concern for human values. Now, I got a quote in here by a KGB guy who says, of course we arrest innocent people. That way the people don't think that they can get away with what they want to get away with, that they're never safe. They had a thing every once in a while.
Fear, and that's what totalitarianism uses. It's always fear. If you are fearful, you will be obedient and comply, and that's what the liberal left uses. They use fear. Fear through political correctness, fear through mandates, and so on and so forth.
Let's look at the Lubyanka prison.
Now remember, we're running out of time here, so I need you to wrap up soon.
Aside from the gulags, you go to Lubyanka prison in Moscow, and their process there, they didn't use gas like the Germans. They used bullets. And they had to develop special leather aprons, full-length leather aprons, because they would take these innocent civilians down in the basement into a little tiny room and stand them in the doorway facing away from them and blow their brains out. And what we get is what's called by police high-speed spatter. They would be covered with blood. They would be shooting these people all day long. No justification, no trial, no nothing. Just take them down there and blow their brains out. And while that was going on, you got people like Dalton Trumbo telling us, and Barbara Streisand later telling us that these are the moral icons of humanity, that this is what we all should be aspiring to. I'll break it off now, but I got plenty more to say.
All right. Well, you know what? And when it comes to the liberal left here, they've completely adopted the socialist platform, the communist platform. They've completely adopted it. And now, I had someone the other day ask me, so, well, Doug, can you explain to me how to argue against the idea that in the 50s and 60s that the parties flipped? that the Republicans used to be this side, the Democrats used to be this side. Now the Democrats have gone this way and the Republicans have gone this way. And that's actually an argument for racism, not socialism. No, the Democrats have always been the racists. They've always been the socialists. You look at Roosevelt, you look at Woodrow Wilson, you look at the progressive ideas and the fascism even. Franklin Delano Roosevelt had the members of his staff read Mussolini's written works. Of fascism, for God's sake. But now you have liberals and non-liberals who just don't know any better because they've been given all this garbage. They don't even know. And when we start talking U.S. Constitution, they are offended by it. It's an oppressive document. They hate it. They don't even understand it. Which Constitution are we referring to? The original intent of the original language, or the living, breathing document has been twisted and murdered by the hands of activist judges and statist politicians? And so what's been fascinating to me is they don't understand the Constitution. They have a completely erroneous viewpoint of what the Constitution is, but they're the first ones to point out that they think Mr. Trump is violating the Constitution. They don't even know what they're talking about when it comes to it. Recently, one of the things I'm referring to was ABC's Jonathan Karl had White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus on, what is that, Face the Nation, I think it is, having a discussion. And Karl, the ABC's Jonathan Karl, attacks Priebus and says, hey, President Trump has been tweeting the failing New York Times has disgraced the media world, gotten me wrong for 2 solid years, and then referred to possibly changing the libel law so that they could be sued for it. Then he says, well, that would require, as I understand it, a constitutional amendment. Is he really going to pursue that? Is that something he wants to pursue? It's a gotcha question. Constitutional amendment to change libel laws? Well, first of all, why is the federal government even involved in libel laws in the first place? The First Amendment says Congress shall make no law regarding religion, free speech, free press. So first of all, if there's going to be libel laws, unless we have an amendment allowing the federal government to have libel laws, that's up to the states, first of all. Second of all, what it is an accusation of Trump wanting to get rid of the freedom of the press. That's what they're saying. That's what they're attacking with. And Priebus wasn't sure exactly what he was trying to get at. He didn't get the gotcha. So when it came to being angry about the way the media attacks Trump in false ways, Priebus's response was, well, I think it's something we've looked at. Well, what he meant was, trying to figure out why the press has been so out of whack and trying to get this corrected. But Karl took it as, we've been looking at changing the First Amendment to take away your freedom of press. That's the kind of attacks that we're receiving. The so-called experts don't view the Constitution from an originalist point of view. And Trump's team doesn't understand the attacks they're getting against them. So now, gentlemen, how do we resolve this? I mean, Dennis, Alex, let's go with Dennis first. How do we resolve this? We've got a media who puts out a false message, a false narrative, but if the White House complains, White House wants to take away their freedom of the press. How do we argue against that?
Well, the answer that comes to my mind is the scripture, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." You got to get the truth out there, because they will always paint you, and no matter what you say, they're going to infer you didn't mean it the way you actually meant it. They're going to twist it. They're going to take the motivation for your statement to where you will not get any good credit for anything that you do that is good. And when you're playing against a team like that, you just can't really care, about what they feel. The problem is they're painting a false scenario that goes to the vast American people. And I think Trump has tried to just bypass the mainstream media. He did that, during the campaign, and he's still trying to go out and just talk to Americans and try to counter all the falsehoods that's being said. I think he can be more forceful in it. And again, not to, plug the movie Enemies Within again, but he gets painted as this guy that is tied with Russians when it's the Democrats that are, and you just need to fight fire with fire.
Well, Priebus in no way was suggesting that President Trump desires to interfere with the right to a free press, but he doesn't understand the Constitution enough to have the response that was appropriate to the attack, because he didn't understand enough. He didn't even realize he was being attacked. I mean, any challenge by the White House or considerations that the Trump administration may address the press's behavior in any way is being seen as a threat. And if it's a threat, to the press, then they're just seeing it as, a threat against the right to freedom of speech, First Amendment freedom, so on and so forth.
Well, he campaigned against fake news for a long time,
right.
So that's part of the normal phrase now in the media is fake news. What is it? Is it true? Is it not?
All right, Alex, give me a 1 minute final response on that.
Yeah, my Bible tells me that I'm supposed to hate the sin but love the sinner. And this is the case that I most find that appropriate. The leftists today, I'm living here in Southern California, and I can't swing a cat without hitting a lefty.
You should be swinging a cat.
Well, that's between me and my veterinarian. But anyway,
we got less than 30 seconds.
I'm saying that these people have been brainwashed.
Right.
It's not their fault, and I've been trying to reach them on an intellectual level for decades, and I'm going to have to more steer toward a gut level.
Well, I'm trying to reach them on a constitutional level too, and between the two of us, we might turn a few heads. We're out of time. Alex, plug yourself.
Yeah, look, if poetry doesn't thrill you, how about my gunfight in Whittier with America's most dangerous bandit? I got the newspaper clippings. I got the letter from America's Most Wanted telling me that they're not going to be able to show the segment they filmed. Check it out.
All right, Dennis, real quick. All right. United we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America. God bless you. PoliticalPistachio.com, DouglasVGibbs.com. See you next week.